Hi, this is AnnHelen. Thank you for joining me in this tutorial. Grab a pencil, a white sheet of paper, and you're ready to go. I'm using a reference photo from Pinterest, but I converted it to black and white. First, I try to get the cranial structure of this person on the photo by using the Loomis method. I draw a vertical line from the top of the sphere to represent the center line of this face that is about 3/4 angle from the front view. Then I draw a line across the equator of the sphere to indicate the eyebrow line, and under that another line for eye level. Next, mark the hairline and measure the distance between the hairline and the eyebrow, and use that same distance to measure the approximate location of the nose and the chin. Sides of the heads are slightly shallower, and I use that to measure the location of the ear, and from the ear, the jawbones to the chin. This video has been speeded up to 3 times its original speed, so feel free to pause or slow it down because this first stage of the drawing process is essential for the later stages. I go through a repetitive process of looking at the reference photo, finding and indicating where the facial features are, and then marking them down very softly and indicating their shapes very softly with my pencil. When I'm satisfied with the overall facial framework, I go in and softly remove most of the construction line. After some erasing, I need to go back and rebuild or redraw some of the shapes that I drew earlier, but also checking what I'm drawing against the reference photo. If you're new to drawing faces or portraits, or even new to drawing itself, do the best you can, but don't expect perfection, because even I don't expect my portrait to turn out perfectly identical to my reference photo.
It is a good idea to set a realistic goal for each of your drawings.
And my goal for this tutorial is not to draw a perfectly rendered face, but to show you a realistic drawing process, which includes a lot of drawing and erasing and redrawing. I call it the building, tearing down, and rebuilding process, like what I'm doing right now, but each time I erase and rebuild or redraw, I make my drawing a little closer to the image I want it to become, especially at this stage when I'm still building the blueprint of my facial or portrait drawing. I am not a slave to any of the lines or marks I've drawn on the paper right now. If you have this mindset when you draw, you will have a much easier time correcting your own drawing and learning from those so-called mistakes. Many online tutorials show you drawing or the drawing of a face as a linear process, but I learned the hard way that drawing is actually a very repetitive process. I can never get the facial proportions correct on my first try, so I repeatedly look at my reference, make changes, look at the reference again, make more changes, and this process continues.
And I repeat this process until my drawing is ready for shading.
In this construction stage, I look back and forth between the reference and my drawing and ask questions such as, are the eyes too far apart or too close together? Is the left eye smaller than the right eye? Is the nose too long or too short? How about the distance between the nose and the upper lip? Does the chin need to be more angular or more rounded? Could the top of the ear be higher? Don't get me wrong, I don't talk to myself out loud when I'm drawing, and I don't think you should do that.
At least not when there are other people around you.
Jokes aside, having a self dialogue quietly with yourself while you're drawing is actually pretty healthy. Because to ask and answer these questions, you have to become a better observer.
And it takes time, training, and repeated practice to be able to observe better. Have you ever taken out some of your older artworks, maybe from 2 or 3 years ago, and take a quick look and immediately you spot certain mistakes that you didn't see? When that happens, that means your power of observation has improved. And that's a good thing. Although there's no hack for improving your power of seeing things, there is one thing you can do to immediately give yourself an advantage during the drawing process. That is to take a break from your drawing, put away your drawing pad or notebook, and come back to your drawing in an hour or a couple of days later, so that you can see your drawing or painting with a fresh pair of eyes and can see what has been working for your drawing or what mistakes that you didn't see in the first time. And if possible, do this several times during your drawing or painting process. Now that I'm looking at my drawing on the video, I'm cringing over the mistakes that I didn't see. So I should have paused the video and practiced what I'm teaching right now. Well, enough of my regrets. Back to the video. I've started shading and I always start at the darkest areas on the drawing. This is so I can get an overall sense of the range of values that I need to use for this drawing and also to prevent my lighter areas from getting too dark. If you're working with graphite pencils or charcoal pencils, it's a good idea to start from dark to lighter values. In this drawing, the darkest values are in the hair, really the parts of the hair that is turned away from the sun or in the places of shadows. I'm also shading in parts of the skin and the shirt that receives the shadows cast by the structure or the head and the neck, which blocks the light from reaching these areas on the neck, chest, and shirt. These kinds of shadows are called cast shadows. I'm also shading in some areas of the neck and chest that receive the most shadows, and not just cast shadows, but also form shadows. Form shadows are usually lighter than cast shadows. And form shadows on a form are caused not by other objects near it, but by the forms of the object itself, wherever the form turns away from the light source. For example, the part of the neck muscle that is turned to the left side away from the sun, and the collarbones and the chest are also turned away from the source of light. And the left side of the face, basically most of the contours, are turning toward the inside of this picture, so they are all form shadows. I'm shading the darkest areas of these form shadows in my first pass of shading because I need to work from dark to light. I'm also working in some of the darkest areas on the face itself, and that includes the eye sockets. In this light condition, there is cast shadow between the nose and the eye and under the eye socket, the cheek area slightly to the left of the nose, the area under and to the left of the nose, and the areas under and to the left of the upper and lower lips. I'm shading in also the right eye socket and to the right of the nose, but these are all form shadows, so they should be lighter than the cast shadows. If you like this tutorial so far, please click on the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any future tutorials like this. Your support helps me make more quality videos like this and helps YouTube to push this video to more audience. Thank you so much for your support. My eyes are comparing the reference photo to my current drawing and ask myself questions about the values. Are the shadows above the chin lighter or darker than those under the chin? Is the right nose bridge darker or lighter than the left nose bridge? And is it darker or lighter than the right cheek? I just drew a very soft line around the contours of the lips, and I'm shading in the inside of the lips with equal or less pressure. You should never draw a hard outline around the lips. And although it seems like I've drawn a rather hard outline around the lips, it's probably because I had to increase the contrast on my video so my pencil marks can show up better. From the photo, I can see that this part of the forehead has form shadows because it faces the left. but the area to the right of it is probably the brightest part of the forehead. So I'm not shading that area for now. I'm darkening the values under the eyebrows because they are one of the darkest areas on the face under this light conditions. There is quite a bit of form shadow under the right eyebrow in the right eye socket, and there's also some cast shadow in the temple area to the right. With my kneaded eraser, I dabbed an area under the right eyebrow, which is the bony area above the eye socket. I'm shading in different planes and parts of the nose with the form shadows, but also keeping the highlights that I see in the reference photo. I'm shading in the form shadows on the right side of the face, which is the lighter part, so I'm being careful not to do it too dark. So I'm holding my B pencil much further from the tip even though you can't see my hand. When you hold your pencil much further away from the tip, you force your hand to hold the pencil more lightly. So you will also shade more lightly. And when I want to shade darker values, I hold my pencil closer to the tip and use more force. I can draw forms and shadows with very light or very dark values, even when I'm just using my B graphite pencil. I highlight the brightest spots on the irises of the eyes, and I shade in the rest of the iris with an overall light gray color, and darken the top parts of the irises under the upper eyelid. The outer corner of the left eye gets very dark. It's probably one of the darkest areas on the face and in the eye itself. So I'm making the outer corner of the left eye socket darker. Certain parts of the left eye look as dark as or even darker than the area under the chin in the shadow areas of the neck and chest. In this stage of the drawing process, you should constantly check the values that you're shading, not just with the reference photo, but also the rest of the face, neck, or any other areas that you're drawing. I'm still constantly making adjustments, but not so much in terms of form or shape right now, but more in terms of the value relationships. Now that I have achieved the right value relationships in the skin tone areas, I start drawing with my mechanical pencil with 4B lead inside. Earlier, when I was drawing in the skin tones, I didn't want to use a 4B pencil because the person in the reference photo has relatively fair skin, and in comparison, her hair is much, much darker. And because 4B graphite is my darkest available pencil, I'm saving the darkest shading to the last step, when I fill in the darkest parts of the hair areas. I'm not drawing the hair strand by strand, but I'm filling the medium dark to the darkest areas of the hair while leaving the highlights in the hair pretty much untouched. So I'm filling in the hair in clumps or shapes that I see from the reference photo and also based on my previous dark layers. There are layers of interesting shapes in the bun in this area, and on the photo there's some really nice dark and light contrasts. But the focal point of my drawing is on the expressions of this person's face. So I downplay the contrast and the layers in the bun of the hair. This way my viewers won't be distracted by the interesting play of light and shadow in the hair area. The only times I've ever chosen the hair over the face to be the emphasis is when I do hair studies. In most cases, especially if you're drawing portraits, the hair should play a secondary or supporting role. And even as I'm darkening the values of the hair and adding some details or indications of details, I avoid spending too much time on the hair areas and go back to the center of the face, which is my focal area. And by the center of the face, I mean the area between and including the eyes and the nose. That's the point from which we build the whole face. And it's also the main area of facial expressions. So I want to make sure that I spend more time in this area than any other areas on the face. I'm darkening the areas of the eye to the values that I see in the reference photo. And now the highlights in the irises really pop. Refining and correcting the shape of the outer edge of the right eye, and I just darken the white of the eye at the outer corner with my B pencil. This gives the eye a more rounded shape. I'm still building on the shading and values from our previous layers, because tonal contrast or value contrast is what gives dimensionality to your drawing or your portrait. I'm finally giving some definition and forms to the ear area. And because it also plays just a supporting role, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just give it the correct shapes, line, and values without overworking the ear. Okay, back to the center of the face, just darkening the values, making sure they're correct. The left eye socket is definitely darker than the right eye socket. And starting from the eyebrows, I work on the nose again. I'm still shading rather softly with my 4B pencil because the 4B can get very dark very quickly, and I'm working on the skin tone areas. I want to capture the particular shape of this nose, so I'm using shading to do that. I worked on the left side of the nose bridge first, which is darker, to the bottom, and now I'm working on the lightest of the form shadows on the nose. I try to use my regular B graphite pencil when I'm shading in the lighter areas. Working outward from the center of the face, I'm now working on the left cheek. The cheek becomes darker as it goes lower. There's some dark cast shadow under the left side of the nose, but I want to shade it softly because it seems to transition very smoothly into a form shadow. Darkening the form and cast shadow under the lower lip. Okay, I've decided to use my number 4 pencil for the cast shadow under the nose because it's so dark. Slightly darkening the philtrum, and I'm finally gonna work on the mouth. First, the upper lip, because it's usually darker than the lower lip in this light condition. I'm still looking at the reference photo for my values. I can see that most part of the lower lip is so light it's actually lighter than the shadow areas on the left cheek. I decided to draw the lower lip in a darker value because I don't need to be a slave to my reference photo. There isn't enough time in this tutorial for me to explain why I said that, but I'm hoping to do that in another video. So what is the take-home lesson for this tutorial? First, build a good framework for your head and facial structures, which may involve lots of building, tearing down, and rebuilding over and over again. Second, have a personal dialogue with yourself, asking the right questions at different stages of your drawing. These kinds of questions will help you become a better observer over time. Third, to achieve depth and dimensionality of your drawing, draw with enough value contrast or tonal contrast. A good understanding of form shadows and cast shadows will help make your drawing look dimensional. Fourth, work in layers, but work from darker areas to lighter areas. I hope you had a good time drawing with me. Please click the like button or the thumbs up button and consider subscribing so you can get my latest tutorials.